Hi, this is Commander Mark Devine, founder of SEAL Fit and author of The Way of the SEAL and Unbeatable Mind. And you are fortunate enough to be listening to T.W. Smith at Kung Fu Podcast. Hoo-yah!
Exploring the culture, the adventure, and the impact of martial arts. That's what Kung Fu Podcast is all about. And I'm your host, T.W. Smith. Well, it feels like it's been a long time since I cranked up the recording gear where we interviewed Mr. Jamie Clubb. And we discussed things, for example, some of the challenges that we face as martial artists. And how can you create a voice for yourself to get your message out? Those are the types of things that were really important for us in that particular episode. In this episode, I want to ask you a question. Why did you start your journey on the traditional martial arts? I have openly shared my reasons for beginning my journey in the traditional Chinese martial arts and have found more peace and harmony in my life through the challenges and demands that the traditional martial arts brings into my life. Your origin story is an important one. It is a fire that is occasionally going to have to be rekindled. It is not to say that the reasons you began the martial arts today can't be different than your origin story, but when times get tough, and they will get tough, you may want to reflect on why you began it all. How has it brought new opportunities for you to transform yourself into this life? The lady in this month's episode has an origin story that has become a driving force of her mission. That's part of the reason why I wanted to bring her on the program. It's not because that she has this big name that you're going to instantly recognize, but because I ran across her material and then I read her story. I invited her to this program without really telling her why, and you can hear all about that during this discussion. Before we begin, I want to make you aware that I've made many updates on our Patreon app, and for those of you that prefer to use the Kung Fu Podcast website, I'll be making many of those updates for the premium members there as well. So without further delay, here is the story of a female martial artist residing in the Pacific Islands, who wrote succinctly, quote, "Martial arts became my sword, my shield, and my pen to protect myself and to send a clear message," end quote.
Let me just start first I wanted to try to pronounce your name. I mean, you have to remember I'm from North Carolina, so is it Tasha Ina?
Nope, Tasha Ina. Ina's my middle name.
Tasha Ina. Okay. Tasha. So if I just call you Tasha, that's okay?
That's totally fine. Yeah.
Tell the audience where you're located.
I am located on the island of Maui, in Hawaii.
Well, that really sucks, huh?
Oh, man, it's awful.
I'm buckling down here in North Carolina. As you and I are speaking, if we do have any problems, there's actually tornado warnings. The spring here in North Carolina usually brings tornadoes. The fall brings the hurricanes. So right now we are under a severe storm watch with tornadoes watches right here in the area. So I should be able to make it as long as the satellites for AT&T keep working.
Yeah, well, be careful over there.
Now, I had a list of things that I have wanted to go through with you, and some of it, as you and I had exchanged just an email or two trying to get this situated, did I ever tell you why I wanted you on the program?
A little bit of yes and a little bit of no.
Well, good. That's exactly how I'd intended to leave it, mostly because I wanted to discover some of the things about you organically at the same time as the audience does, and most of it was just because of some of the work I saw you were doing, and I thought and felt like you would be a good fit for some of the things that we do at Kung Fu Podcast.
Awesome.
And, yeah, in Kung Fu Podcast, I don't know if you know anything about Kung Fu Podcast or not. I've been doing this program for, I guess it's going to be going on 5 years here pretty soon, and about coming up on a few hundred pieces of material content, a couple hundred podcasts along the way.
Wow.
The whole tagline on it's basically what I try to stick with is that it's about the culture, the adventure, back to martial arts. And when I began to research your material, you became the impact of martial arts through the culture of women, mostly because of the adventures that you've written about.
Well, thank you. I've had a wide variety of background when it comes to martial arts styles, and I feel like all of those have pulled together to create something really great for women as far as self-defense goes.
Yeah, so which actually leads me into the next segues beautifully, because my next card here I had written down is I would like to take moments and ask you to share with the audience the story about what led you into the martial arts, mostly associated with the betrayal of a childhood friend.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't a childhood friend. It was a family friend who was actually one of my brother's best friends growing up. And he was 17 years older than I was. And I just knew him as a big brother. Like all of my friends, all of my brother's friends, I looked up to them. I thought that they were just amazing people. And I never questioned it because my family trusted them. So for me, it was really shocking to have a situation where I was being followed by one of my brother's friends, and trying to talk to my family about it was really hard for me at the time. You're a teenager, and I think in some ways I was worried that they would think that I did something to provoke it or something along those lines. So I thought, I'm going to handle this myself. And I confronted this person. And I had known him for 2 years at that point. So I don't know how long he was following me. But I do know it was more than at least a couple of months. It could have been for a couple of years. So the confrontation was really scary. He was ex-military, special forces. He was 6'2", over 230 pounds. So he was a really big guy, and I was probably about 2 inches shorter and a lot smaller, and definitely didn't have the build that I do now. But I verbally confronted him, and my parents, I have a really amazing family unit. My parents really helped me with setting good boundaries. And so I verbally told that person, you are not allowed to talk to me. You're not allowed to come near me. If you do, all of the relationships that you have with my family will be gone. And he came back with a slew of curses, and I just stood my ground. I repeated myself, and he stopped following me. But I realized at that moment that if I was close enough, if he was there face to face and he took a swing at me, I would have been a goner. And so I knew that I needed to go in and get martial arts training. Both of my parents, they were each martial artists, and each instructors. My mom has hands as fast as lightning. So we used to do slap boxing when I was younger, but I never talked to my parents and said, hey, I really think I need martial arts training. So that was more or less the beginning of me going to an actual dojo and studying Japanese martial arts. It's not the best of circumstances to go in there, but that was the reason. And right. I think that it was, one of the greatest decisions for me in my life.
So when I read some of the story, that was part of the reason I wanted to have you come onto the program. First is because you had gotten involved in the traditional martial arts, but some of the things that led you into it as a teenager, facing an adult, and the circumstances to which you described is very different than what many other people have shared their stories about what got them motivated in the martial arts. I had nothing. For me, it was almost the opposite end of the extreme of the reason why I got involved in martial arts. And you also had another story in there about something along the lines of being assaulted with a man who had a steel pipe.
Oh, yes, the 12-inch wrench, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so a couple of years before I decided to make my move to Maui, I was publishing a children's book. It was a multicultural children's book. I was really proud of it, and I had spent all my life wanting to be an author. And I had all these dreams and aspirations of what I wanted to do as an author, all these books that I wanted to write, everything. And it was a week before my book launch, and I had a knock on my door. And I went to the door, and before opening the door, because at this point I actually had martial arts training and background, and I was teaching it. I asked who it was. They said their name, what they were there for, which was maintenance, and they knew the apartment manager's name. And so because of that, and because the fact that our building was locked and you have to have a key in order to get in, I opened the door and let this person into my home. So as he was doing work in the bathroom, which coincidentally, there were problems with the pipes inside the bathroom. So I don't know if there was any tampering of any kind, but he was working in there, and he started asking me very inappropriate questions. My name, where I'm from, what I do, to other things of, am I happy in my relationship? And I suddenly, as I'm working, because I was focused on this book launch, I'm focused on getting the connections and emailing people, I'm suddenly realizing that there's something wrong. And then he said that he wanted to go check the pipes in the kitchen. And that was when it just hit me. He was in the kitchen, and this realization dawned on me that there was no problem with the pipes in the kitchen. And it was this slow motion moment. And I'm sure that you might have had something like that where, slow motion, everything just sort of slows down and you're kind of taking in your surroundings. That's basically what happened to me. And I looked up and I saw him in the kitchen holding on to a 12-inch wrench and staring at me. And at that time, I went into my martial arts mode of assessing the situation, looking at the weapon that he had, the size that he was, trying to decide whether or not I should use my martial arts skills right away, or if I should hold back and see what was going on and what he was going to do. Okay. So he actually walked up, sat down next to me, and he was brushing my hair away, saying that I looked very tense. And of course I was very tense. But I made eye contact with him. I was very stern with him, and I put a hand in between us and sliced it through the air. And I said, listen, you need to go back to what you're doing. I need to focus on what I'm doing. And I knew that if I showed any fear, he would hit me with that wrench. Yeah, and he was asking, are you happy in your relationship? I said, yes, happy, go. And we just stared each other down for a second. And then he went back into the bathroom, and I ran. I closed my laptop, grabbed my purse, grabbed my shoes, and ran out the door. And I vividly remember him yelling out, does your boyfriend go down on you? 'Cause I would. And I was disgusted, and I opened the door, and I got to the very end of the hall when he got to the door, and he yelled, are you really leaving? And I said, oh yeah, I'm gone. Ran down the stairs, ran straight into the property manager, who looked like a linebacker. He was huge. And we were staring at each other, and I just started yelling at him. I was so lividly angry. And I said, who the hell are you hiring? Why would you do this? And he goes, I didn't hire anybody. And so we stared at each other, and he had the realization that there was something very wrong. So he ran up the stairs, barreling up the stairs and through the door. And I just hear this huge thwack. And he had been pushed over and hit. And then the guy ran off.
The guy with the pipe? I mean, the guy with the wrench?
Yeah.
Oh, so this was all a setup. I mean, you were, wow.
So so basically what happened there, he ran off. I was terrified. I ran down stairs. I ran outside. I remember also calling my boyfriend at the time. And the first thing that he asked me to do wasn't, are you okay? It wasn't, I will be there shortly. Where are you? It was, can you go upstairs to check and see if anything was taken? It was a very interesting realization that, one, I just had this horrible thing happen to me, and two, I am not too happy with the relationship that I'm in. You find these things out. Yeah, you find these things out at the weirdest times. I definitely wanted to try and make this relationship work because he was a person who I knew from middle school. But I just thought, gosh, you didn't ask at all about my safety. But I had this woman, and she just amazing to me. She's a police officer currently still. Her name was Officer Rush, and at 6 a.m. she started work, and she got the call and came in to my aid at 8 a.m. Now, she looked all over for this guy until 7 p.m. at night and interrogated him until 11 p.m. And
that was a long day.
That was a very long day for her. She kept on checking in on me, which I have not ever experienced that. I've talked to friends about it. They haven't had that. So it was really great to have somebody in law enforcement who just really cared so much about your safety. I had a Detective Miller, who was on the case, and he would check in on me, and they stayed all the way through the date of the trial.
Oh, okay.
So this was a year and a half of making sure that I'm okay, making sure that there was a no contact order. They had originally said that the bail would be really high, and there would be no way for this person to get out of jail. Now, mind you, I found out that he was in the military, so I was very happy that I didn't try anything, just because I wasn't sure what my skill level was against his skill level. So I'm happy that I assessed that situation and decided to take a different route. I also found out that he was married with children, and that he lived 3 blocks over and 4 blocks up. But because of confidentiality reasons and worry about retaliation that police officers had or would have with anyone, they couldn't tell me the exact location of where he lived. So that's a really that's a really wide range when it comes to your home. So I had to move, and I moved within 3 months of that experience, but stayed through trial because they didn't have enough evidence to charge him before, when apparently something had happened and he had raped someone. Yeah. And so for me, I wanted to stick this through because I just knew that this person was not healthy. They were deranged, mentally unstable, and it was very calculated what he did. The neighbors had said that they had seen his car for over a couple of months just outside of my apartment complex.
Well, I can tell you this much, Tasha, you're a much nicer person than I am, because unstable is that predator, jackass. There's a lot of other words I probably use. This is exactly why I didn't want to tell you too much about part of the reasons why I wanted to have on the program was because of the stories and what you were bringing to the martial arts table, both culturally and through these unfortunate adventures. And you had written that martial arts became your sword, your shield, and my pen to protect myself and to send a clear message. Did you write this? Did you really start to have that strong of a feeling about your martial arts being your sword, your shield, and your pen after this second adventure? Or was this something that had already started taking place for you?
This had already started taking place for me, but it didn't run home until that time. I had already experienced stalker situations, and there was that history. I had experienced trauma from previous relationships and different stuff like that, but nothing was as terrifying as that situation. And despite the fact that this person didn't physically punch me in the face, it was by far one of the most life-changing events I've ever had. And I did follow through. I put him in jail. The sad thing is that while we were waiting for trial, he did actually rape someone before the end of the trial.
So he was sent to prison for rape and raped someone else.
Well, he was on a no contact order because he had gotten out of jail on bail. So he was out there, and I had hoped that he would be put away. I had a no contact order. I'm pretty sure that he had broken into my car at one point and stole lipstick and a couple of pictures of mine, but I didn't have enough evidence to have anything happen with that. But there were multiple good things that came out of this. He was in the military, so he had to go through military court after he went through court with me. And then on top of that, then he had a rape case against him as well. So he is still in jail.
In that civilian court, the court system for the military is no joke. So with those stories being the backdrop to some of the things that I really wanted to kind of share with the audience, the driving factors, the motivating factors, some of the forces that brought you into the martial arts and have kept you in it, what styles do you practice primarily?
So primarily, I focus a lot on the Aikido, the Jiu-Jitsu, and the Tai Chi, just because you're using softer styles. It's easier for women, a smaller body frame. And the joint manipulation, joint locks, pressure points, it's a lot easier than doing the kicks and punches where you can break bones and in different situations where you're going up against somebody who is stronger than you, that might not be the best route. So those are the ones that I tend to lean towards. I definitely am not done with my training. I mean, I'm sure, as you know, it's a lifelong learning experience as a martial artist, but I definitely want to study more styles so that I can continually build up what I'm teaching. Because for me, I used to do salsa dancing back in Washington, and I really loved it. So 3 years into my salsa dancing career and into teaching my martial arts classes, I was walking late one night to my car up in Seattle, and it was dark and I was alone, and I just had the realization that over 50% of what I was teaching would not be effective while wearing 3-inch heels and a dress.
Okay.
So I started thinking about it in those terms, and even looking at it from different perspectives of, well, what if I was wearing a 3-piece suit? What if I was wearing, constricting clothing or uniforms, different stuff like that? I started asking myself the question, well, what would I do if somebody was choking me what would be the best course of action, what would be the best style, the best moves. And I started compiling all of this together to create a curriculum that I thought would be very effective for not just women, but people in general.
Okay.
So yeah, for me, I do focus on supporting women and girls with the work I've done. I had a program for middle school and high school girls back in Washington focused on self-esteem, body image, and self-defense training.
Okay.
It was just really important for me to be thinking out of the box and really understand, coming from the perspective of people based on where they're at and their life scenario.
Well,
what can I do to help them?
Yeah, I remember reading something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing, that you were involved in either some sort of self-defense course or was part of a seminar, and pretty much the gist of it is that some of the instruction was pretty much as if he was talking to me: shave your head, don't wear earrings, and you'll be fine. Right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. Don't worry.
And as you see my picture here on Skype, I mean, that's me, right? I mean, I'm bald headed, I have my earrings, and yeah, I've taken away 2 target zones in fact, I was joking about this the other night when we were in our practical martial arts class, and we do a lot of sparring, and we go through what we would call realistic type of training,
nice.
And so for me, realistic type of training is what's appropriate for me to achieve my objective. And as part of it goes along, we were sparring around, and one of the things I did is I grabbed my student by the hair, the top of his hair, and I said, this is realistically exactly what I would do, and that's exactly why I shaved my head, right? So because over the years I was always mixed up with something, but you went through this experience where pretty much it was the first guideline in teaching you self-protection was just forget about being a woman and start there. And you had some strong feelings about that.
I did have some strong feelings. I just thought, don't wear your hair in a ponytail. Don't, I mean, that person could still grab my hair. So what do you want me to do? You want me to put it in a low bun or a braid, and then don't wear long earrings.
Don't wear heels.
Don't wear heels. Don't wear long earrings. I mean, there's a lot of it that just seemed very unrealistic expectations for me. You can't ask all women to suddenly wear flats. And I'm sure a lot of them would get really angry if you told them that, or told them how to dress, what to wear, what to do with their hair. And I thought, I think that it's really important that people choose what they want to wear, but understand that they need to be able to defend themselves no matter what. So it was a task for me to look at all of those different scenarios. And I had a self-defense partner, really great self-defense partner, that started the same week I did in martial arts. And so we sort of grew together. He had previous martial arts background in Chinese martial arts, and then also he was in the Navy, so he had military training as well. He would attack me while I would be wearing civilian clothes and dressing up in some of these different cases. And he was actually one of my salsa dancing partners too. So he understood what I was talking about, where I was saying, I'm not going to go out salsa dancing, wearing pants and flat shoes and not get dressed up. It's just not something that I want to do. And so it was really helpful for me that he was willing to take the time to actually do that, so that I could process it and see what would be most effective.
Oh, and the thing that really struck me with that story is part of the reason why I wanted you on the program is because you put it in very realistic terms for you on a day-to-day basis. Because in the martial arts, we will practice techniques, whether we're rolling around on the ground and that's unrealistic, or we choke each other out with our gi, which I don't have mine on right now, or things like that. And those are all what we would call, like, I think a friend of mine, Ian Abernathy, likes to say dojo fun. Right, where it's like things that we do for fun and just because we enjoy martial arts and rambling around and pounding on each other. Then there's other things like you were just saying. I mean, you're a woman, you want to go out to the movies, you want to look nice. But yet and still, you have to be able to become aware of what compromises your safety, and then do other things in order to make sure that you have balanced that out somehow, whether that's over awareness of your settings, who's around you, any number of things. So when you're working primarily with women and children right now, what are some of the things that you really try to hit home with them when you're first trying to get them started?
I really want them to be more aware. I think that it's really important, and I really stress the awareness piece is invaluable, because a lot of people, we go through life and we don't really look at the people who are walking past us. We don't pay attention to all of the people who are surrounding us. And for me, I give them safety tips that I just want them to be more mindful of, to think of when it comes to walking around. Don't look down and constantly stare at your phone. If you're going on a run, don't wear headphones or earbuds in each ear. It's just having that awareness and understanding, especially when it comes to kids, being more cautious and asking more questions, and not automatically trusting an adult, because I think a lot of kids, they look at adults as authority figures, which is wonderful. But if you have a stranger coming up to you and saying that they want you to go with them somewhere, or they need you to fill out some sort of paperwork, you've never met them before, it's good to question. When I was working with kids in the schools, that was something that I really pushed for them to do. I wanted them to just be more cautious than they were.
Well, one of the things that clicks in my head that I remember teaching my son, I was trying to teach him a little land navigation. So like, for example, if we're out hiking or if we're going out somewhere, that one of the things I try to get him to do is periodically, about every few minutes, is just to stop and look behind you. Right.
That's great.
And so,
yeah.
And so it does a couple of things. First is it provides you a reflection upon, in case something happened and you had to turn around, that some of that area would already be in your memory. What did it look like as you were walking away from the house? What did it look like as you were walking away from XYZ? So land navigationally, it helps a lot to periodically just stop and look around. But the other thing is that, as I was talking with him, I said, and son, one day when you're growing up and you're in the city or going out, periodically just stop and glance behind you. And
yes.
You just get used to every now and then stopping and glancing behind you, just not so that you could also get through the city, but you can become very acutely aware of somebody.
Nice. How old is your son?
He is 15 now. 16. Yeah.
All right. Taking on the world.
Well, pretty much. Look, one of the things, too, I was in a conversation with a friend of mine, Jamie Clubb, not long ago, and I really try to encourage martial artists to do is to find a voice. For me, a lot of my voice comes through my podcast and some of the other things I do, and I'm trying to expand upon that in some other areas. If I was going to look at your work, I would have naturally guessed that your voice was primarily through your blog.
Yeah, through writing. I really enjoy writing. I'm upping my visibility. I'm working on going live. I actually have this woman who is a Wing Chun instructor in Australia, and her name's Antonella Spatola, and she and I go live every Monday, 10 a.m. Hawaii time. So it's like Tuesdays at 6 a.m. in Australia. But we go over all these different safety tips. And I think that because both of us are introverts, it's been really helpful for each of us to have sort of another person, safety net, if you will, be able to lean on and work with when it comes to sharing with an audience and having a camera in your face.
Oh, yeah. So. Mm-hmm. I had noticed also that, before I go any further, I had made myself a note. Do you ever see Hawaii Five-0 out there?
No, I haven't, but I really I keep on looking around because I always see on social media all of these high visibility people who are on the island. So, Liv Tyler, Steven Tyler lives here, and you have Mick Fleetwood who lives here, and I've met him, and my boyfriend had a contract with him in LA, and so it's just fun, the people who you meet, just because you live in a destination spot. You have a whole bunch of people walking through.
See, for being here in North Carolina and having lived many years in Texas, I keep thinking it's like, certainly if you live on Hawaii, of course, that's the first thing I have to get over my head, is that Hawaii as a state is what, 7 or 8 islands? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so it's like you can live in one place and never really bump into anybody of the other 6 places.
It's true. A lot of people stay to their island.
Oh, there's homebodies.
Yeah, because well, there's different personalities for different places. A lot of people talk about how Oahu is sort of the LA of Hawaii.
Okay.
And I noticed that a lot of Washingtonians and West Coast people come to Maui. It's a very low-key place. I know that when I was living in Washington State, I was a workaholic, and this has made me slow down, not necessarily because I want to, but because people are just a slower pace here. They're like, oh, I'll see you at this time, and it'll be an hour later. they'll show up, and it's like, okay, let's go with this. So it's really made me slow down my pace, despite the fact that I run 2 businesses and do all of the other little projects that I'm doing. So
okay. Well, I have just a couple more questions that will. One of the things I think is really important for anybody who's in the martial arts is to have a knowledge and to expand their knowledge out into things that are not martial arts. For me, it was mostly physical biomechanics, athletic performance. That's what I did my graduate work in. I still work in clinics and work with athletes and things along those lines. And even though I started with that well before I ever got involved in the martial arts, it really helped me. Other people have physics, and my primary teacher, he was mostly a cook. And he would almost everything that he would teach you, he would put it metaphorically into cooking, right? And so you'd be trying, for example, to go through a technique, and he'd say, "You're too soggy." You're too soggy. Right? And so, he would always put it. He would put it in these, or he'd say, your kung fu. He said, you got to take your time with it. He said it's like making a good oil for cooking. You can't rush it. You got to get the right ingredients. You got to put them all in the right oil. And then you have to let them keep soaking and agitated every now and then. But there's no rushing.
Marinate.
Yes. You can't rush it. You can't cuss at it. You can't beg it. You can't pay it. It will move at the pace it's supposed to move. And that was something that always kind of resonated with me, is that he used his basis of knowledge as a cook to help me metaphorically understand the martial arts. I use my background in physical medicine and physical therapy and sports medicine and things along those lines to help me. Your other areas, as you said, you run 2 businesses, you do some other things, and you also enjoy being an author. Have you learned in other areas or other fields that has helped you better understand or express your martial arts?
Absolutely. I am a lifelong learner, and I've gone all the way from grade school up through graduate school, getting my MBA. And I've been able to take the skills that I've learned from martial arts and the discipline and put those into the work that I do, but also the jobs that I have. I have a social media business, which is kind of an interesting career choice. But what I've learned from the social media and cyberbullying and awareness, all of those different pieces, I actually put them into my trainings when I'm teaching. So that's just something that I don't think a lot of people necessarily think of, but in cyberspace, online, on the internet, it's a whole other platform to be mindful of and be aware of, and really make sure that the information that you're putting out there is very purposeful.
Well, one of the other areas that you had mentioned, and once you mentioned it, it made me jot down a note. You said you enjoy salsa dancing. Many years ago, I began practicing the West Coast swing.
Oh, yeah.
And because of the nature of that particular dance, you have to use angles and timing and subtle body adjustments in order to allow your partner to follow a lead or get out of the way. And it really did help me change a lot of the things that I understood as far as moving. And to be honest with you, I actually started using some of those steps as part for the martial artists to help them, how to say this nicely. Listen, a lot of guys have a lot of brute strength above their belly button. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they could find their feet with a magnifying glass. I mean, it's like their footwork usually, I would say most of the time is, if I'm lucky, is pretty good. Most of them come in atrocious, right? And it's just that we're used to kind of using our strength. And when you try to teach just foot dexterity, like, okay, let's move here, it takes a lot of time. Did the dance influence your work?
Yes, it did a lot. For salsa dancing, I also did country line dancing. That's kind of that's an interesting one. I've done that. I've done belly dancing classes and a whole bunch of other stuff. But I love the way that when it comes to salsa dancing with your partner, there's you're feeling that person's energy and you're working with it and anticipating the next move of what they're going to do. And when I look at martial arts, I see it the same exact way, focusing on balance, focusing on fluidity, and really taking those aspects of a dance and putting them into play. Also, when it comes to salsa dancing and country line dancing for that matter, you are setting boundaries with that person and their body of how close you want that person to be and how you want to be treated. Because there's some people who will dance and they'll spin you a certain way, or they'll try and make you do a dip that you don't necessarily want to do, and I stiff arm them. So yeah, I had somebody try and bend me over one time, and I ended up doing a martial arts move where I actually got behind their back and I bent them over. So taking the aspects of dance and putting them into martial arts has been very helpful, but also the teaching aspect. When you're teaching salsa dancing, you're breaking down the moves into very digestible steps.
Absolutely.
And I think that when it comes to martial arts, a really good teacher will do that for you. They'll do the step by step, so then you can understand in your mind all the things that you have to do. I took this not martial arts, but it was a self-defense training with Jeff Alexander. Do you know who that is?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, so taught Rocky Balboa. It was called the Warrior Spirit Training, and I took that with my mom. And that was a really great helper for when I teach now, because the way that he taught it, it was very digestible. But what I really liked is how, kind of like what you're saying, you're taking these different life scenarios and you're putting them into practice.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. The thing that I remember the most about when I was first learning the dance was exactly what you said there, was that everything was literally step by step in small steps. And for those of you who are listening to the program and maybe don't practice an organized dance like salsa dancing or something, or the West Coast swing, for example, it's broken down. And so when I'm talking about taking a step, the beginners start off at 80 beats per minute, right? You're looking at 80 beats, and to be any good, really, you have to get up to 120 beats per minute. So that's you got 2 or 3 things happening very, very quickly, and all of this has to be maintained in a steady flow. And it really did help me look at some of the things I was teaching and break them down into smaller angles and break them down into smaller inches so that the practitioners could slow it down step by step and then naturally speed it back up to a rate that would be suitable for them to execute that technique. But let's see here. Currently, I saw you actually, I think you put out something just yesterday or the day before. You're primarily teaching in the god-awful gyms of Honolulu and other places, aren't you? I mean, I saw you out in these really nice places.
Well, it's Maui. So but you're totally fine. I teach in multiple areas on the island, and I have one that's called Powerhouse Gym in Kihei. I really love it. I'm doing an 8-week series there. I have a beautiful studio. It's a Pilates and yoga studio in Lahaina that I do 2 workshops a month in. And I do one at Serious Fun Fitness Pilates studio, but I also do contract work in different areas. The Four Seasons is hiring me. So it's really fun for me to go to a person's place of work and help them put together a safety emergency plan, do a safety assessment of all of the different possible scenarios that could go on at their work. So there's that. I'm working with restaurants on the island. So there's a restaurant called Pie Artisan Pizzeria, and they're getting together and getting all of the women who work on Front Street together for a self-defense workshop. And it's called Drinks in Defense because they're all bartenders or they're all waiters. And what do you do when you're dealing with somebody who is under the influence? Because that's something that's very real that happens for them. On top of that, though, I also have an online self-defense course. And that's something that I'm developing more and more. I'd like to have more classes, and I'm putting together some right now. But the online self-defense course, I have people who are in other areas of the United States and other areas of the world who really want to learn self-defense, know the importance of it, but just don't have time. They're doing a million different projects, so going to a dojo or martial arts school is very unrealistic for them, and they want to go at their own pace. And Olympic athletes, when they're practicing, they can do visualization techniques that are just as good as the physical practice. So for me, I put together a series of 8 classes, and there's different attacks per class, and I have counters to those attacks. But I do a demo first, and then I break down the move, and then I'm actually teaching someone on the video. So there's a woman who has never had a self-defense course before, and I was teaching her on video. And then I have an at-home section. So a lot of women in my classes, they say, my husband won't let me attack him or do a counter move. He let me try it once and he'll never let me do it again. And so I have them go through my online self-defense course, and I put together the at-home self-defense moves that you would do as though nobody was there. So you have to actually have hand placement as though someone is with you, but it helps you to practice and mentally get the movements down.
Well, the idea of online classes, I have, it's usually a mixed feeling. I'll explain why. It's not bad. It's just that a lot of times, when I read certain things, I don't think of, actually, I do think that learning online, for example, or with someone who's actually caring, and it sounds like you are, is of a greater advantage than trying to learn from a book, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So when you go, well, I got this self-defense book, and I'm going to be spending all weekend on it. Well, it's really hard to envision what you're doing from step to step in a book. So at least on video, you have the resolution. And I think as long as it's my feeling is that, I can teach a lot of things up to the point where we reach a threshold that you've got to find somebody that you can practice with occasionally in order to actually, there has to be that. You can't visualize flying a jet and fly the jet, right? You just can't do it, right? I mean, you can practice it, and it's helpful, right? And it's also helpful to see your objective in your visualization. It's helpful to see you facing fears in a visualization. It's also helpful to see you how you might respond and have some education, like you're explaining there. But in the end of it, you are going to eventually have to have somebody like your husband who is going to allow you to whoop up on them just a little bit.
Yeah. No, I agree. And being the type of person that I am, I pull from all of these different places, trying to choose relevant moves and techniques. And I am probably the worst critic when it comes to online classes.
Oh, okay, good. Good.
No, I'm very skeptical. Because I go through, I want to teach something that people are going to be able to digest. So I'll go through all of these different self-defense videos that people teach, and I'm right there with you where I'm thinking, well, that's completely impractical to teach online. You have to have a person there with you.
There you go. But I did have one other question and a comment too.
Yeah.
Some people who have been through either trauma or other versions of assault or stalking, the last thing they ever want to do is to go into a public place like a martial arts place, or even a seminar at the Powerhouse Gym or other places like at my school. They don't want to be in a group of 7 or 8, 9 people that they don't know that are going to be practicing aggressive acts, because they've already been through that. The fear of just overcoming the past trauma just to try to learn something is a big deal. And that's one of the advantages, I think, of having something like an online media class. They can do it in private and get started there.
It's spot on what you're saying. Because of my experience that I had, that last experience that I told you about, I had extreme post-traumatic stress.
Okay.
And because there was a no contact order, but that person, I am very positive, broke into my car and, lived in the same area that I did, I was terrified to leave my house. And so I thought about those people who were in that circumstance, who were in those situations, and really felt like I needed to come up with something that would be educational for them and up their confidence enough so that they could take their next steps that they need to do. I mean, obviously, go get support, go see a therapist, all that kind of stuff, but something that would up their confidence enough so that they feel secure in who they are and feel safe.
Yeah, and you would be critical to that, because I mean, for them to come from a place of being assaulted or having some trauma to go into an online class where they get to meet you, hear your voice, see your face, go through some moments with you, and then maybe one day they can actually take that to that next step where they show up to the Powerhouse Gym and actually get one-on-one training with you or personal training with you, to where they're actually out and being engaged with others and taking one step, like we were talking about before, one small digestible step at a time to get themselves in a place where they could be more confident.
Yeah, I think that it is really important. And I think that it is extremely important that they find a good place to learn. I've had students who were put off by other self-defense instructors. Apparently, this one of my students took a jiu-jitsu self-defense course, and and there were 3 guys and 1 girl teacher, and I guess that one of the guys was making a joke about rape, and I'm sure that he was trying to make light of some sort of situation that was really terrible, but to that person, it just re-traumatized her. And I have had students that I've talked to and worked with where me just having my questionnaire and asking them if they've ever been attacked before was a trigger for them. So being able to understand a person who has been through that kind of trauma and know what you could do to help them so that they can digest the information and it's palatable, I think is really important. And I do think that, both men and women can be really great instructors, but having that understanding and that awareness of what somebody has gone through. There was a bouncer who had been in a huge brawl on the island and had experienced extreme post-traumatic stress, and I was sitting with him when I was doing my physical therapy sessions, and he just couldn't get out of it. It was sort of like this broken record where you remember those VHS tapes where you put them in and then they get stuck and then they kept on skipping back to that one spot. That's how it is for people who have post-traumatic stress. They're reliving that one moment all the time. And so how do you break that cycle? How do you get through to them to say, focus on this one section with me for this period of time and just take a step away from all of the thoughts that are going through your head.
Well, we've been chatting for a little bit over an hour now, and I part of the reason I didn't tell you a whole lot of the reasons why I had wanted to bring you onto the program is so I could share them organically as we were talking. And most of it was because your purpose in the martial arts and the drivers that got you into the martial arts was so much different than most of the stories that are out there for people who are involved in the martial arts. Plus, I also felt like that your message and how you share your message was something that other people could find value in hearing from you. So
thank you.
Thank you for coming on the program. So with that being said, how would you best tell them to find you?
You can go to wwd.international. And that's my official website. You can also feel free to contact me on any of my social media sites under LE Live Action. So that's ELLELIVEACTION. I'm usually pretty quick to respond to private messages, but then you can also email me at LELiveAction, ELLELIVEACTION @gmail.com.
And in the future, perhaps in the years to come, would you be interested in coming back sometime?
Yes, I would love to.
I don't have any plans to go to Maui anytime soon.
Hey, if you do, you got a tour guide.
The Powerhouse Gym. As long as I can find the Powerhouse Gym. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Her motivation for starting traditional martial arts was directly linked to her safety. She has taken her traditional martial arts and transformed portions of them to help provide services to her community. She is working in a positive direction with others and making a difference. Her primary voice is her written word, much like Mr. Jamie Clubs. And the primary message there is, keep working. Find a voice that resonates with you, that you're comfortable with, and really make it good. To follow up on this, there's going to be a special episode on the difference between fake and real empowerment by Kung Fu Podcast Agent of Action, Kai Morgan. And I'll be having that out very soon for you. This particular episode made me consider various ways that we as martial artists can take critical moments of our lives and transform them into driving forces. In this episode, we heard about betrayal, vulnerability, and a teaching methodology that basically said, if you want to be safe, then don't be a woman. Don't dress up. And this martial artist took exception to that. Good for her. Let's close this episode with a quote from her work. Martial arts became my sword, my shield, and my pen to protect myself and to send a clear message. I'll be talking with you soon.